It's exciting to think about. The things that you just described are exciting. The ability to continue to learn, to continue to do new things, to continue to move forward. And I think that's the difference. I think that's really the difference between optimism and striving and perfectionism, right?
Hmm.
You think I'm going to be happy when things are perfect. I'm going to be happy when I have this fake life that I'm envisioning for myself.
Hmm.
And sadly, perfectionism, you rob yourself of that feeling of happiness and satisfaction because it's never complete.
Hmm.
Something is never complete to say job well done. And what you just described is this great optimism where you're always striving, you always want to be better, but you have this satisfaction along the way
Hmm.
of of that you don't rob yourself with this idea that it has to be perfect, right?
You're listening to the Reed Fletcher podcast. Tori Poulter came on the show today. Now, Tori has a wealth of knowledge and plenty of experience. You're going to absolutely love this episode. She has 25 years at corporate executive positions at P&G Beauty, L'Oreal, and most recently Younique. Now, she left all of that to start her own business, which is what she's doing now, coaching women. She specializes in business and sales coaching for women, motivational speaking, assertive behavior, balance, self-discovery, and planning and organizational systems. So she's helping a ton of women to feel empowered, grow their business, balance their life, communicate clearly. She has a very good grasp. I was very impressed with her knowledge about communication. She understands how to be assertive, how to get you what you want without being aggressive, without being hostile, without being passive aggressive. She just, I felt, had a very good mindset on striving and progress while staying present. And a very interesting story. Very, like I said, very impressed by the way that she sees things. Tori Poulter, I hope you enjoy the show. I did some. I've talked with Ethan quite a bit. I did a little bit of stalking as well, and I think what you're doing is awesome. Like so you're in the corporate world for a long time,
Long time.
and now you've transitioned into your own coaching group, right?
Yes, that is correct. I started off pretty early in my career. Actually started off as a hairdresser. Well, went to BYU and went to hair school and then got a corporate job. I think I was 22
Mm-hmm.
and and ended up, my husband ended up being a stay-at-home dad for 18 years, and we're down to one kid, and it sort of dawned on me, hey, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, which is coach,
Mm-hmm.
mostly women. I coach mostly women, almost all women, and personal development and interviewing and a little bit of business consulting.
I love that. What do you say you coach? So what does that entail?
Couple of things. I do private coaching.
Okay.
So I have private coaching clients, and that is it's interesting. When I went through certification to become a coach, so I've managed women and I guess coached women and men, but a lot of women for so many years, and in some cases pretty large teams,
Mm-hmm.
and saw some patterns, saw some pretty strong patterns of behavior. And so I, just as part of what I've done over the years, have done coaching as part of managing people. And so when I decided to branch out and do this on my own, I wanted to go through certification to legitimize, right, what
Mm-hmm.
I was doing, instead of just like a declaration of now I'm a life coach, right?
Yeah.
And I learned some really interesting things in that process. And I guess they were things that intuitively you know, but as part of the formal coaching process, the idea is that if one area of your life is out of balance, nothing really goes well. So in all of the areas of life, and there are, 5, 6, depending on how you look at it, you got to have things humming in each area. And so what I thought would be almost exclusively business coaching has turned out to be more little bit of business, little bit of how to balance all your roles, a little bit of how to do what you love, a little bit of how to understand how finances play a role in your happiness, how your physical health plays a role in your happiness, and how to have a little bit of courage in doing the things that you want to do, how to have empathy for others, how to listen to others, and how to find joy in your life. And so I coach privately, and then one of the things that has been a really unexpected and great part of it is group coaching. So I think I'm up to 11 groups where, and I use Facebook as my platform, where you purchase a ticket to the session, right? And it's 8 weeks long, and we go through 8 weeks of training. Each week is a different area of personal development.
It's like a different area of your life. Like, what are some?
Well, yes, different area. How to be assertive, how to ask for what you want. So there's something on sort of the how to communicate better.
Mm-hmm.
I really have 2 buckets, Reed. I have how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So the communication bucket, and then the control your life bucket. And in the communication bucket are things like effective listening, how to use assertively communicate, how to ask for what you want, how to deal with difficult people, those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the control your life, a planning system, how to set goals, how to stop multitasking, all of those types of things, right? How to just take control and get what you want. And really, I've divided it into 2 areas. Now I'm getting into more social media skills, and this latest group that I have guests on every week. And so, they talk about things that I don't really know anything about, which is great, which teaches me and diversifies things just a little bit.
I find that very helpful. And I mean, let me say, probably more so for women, but for anyone who's trying to get ahead, specifically in the workforce. I don't know why I say more so for women. It seems that when you talk about assertiveness or asking for what you want, for whatever reason, I don't know where the conditioning came from, but you're exactly right. A lot of women are more agreeable than they need to be. And so, you can see a woman maybe even feel guilty for like asking for a raise. And again, I think that's the same case with guys, but I tend to notice women seem to have more of an issue with that.
It is more, Reed, you're right. It is more with women, and studies show that it is more with women. And I've become fascinated on the topic, managing women for so long and interviewing women and interviewing men. And you probably see it in the biggest extreme in the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from a few places. The Harvard School of Business has done a lot of studies and research and work on this, and I'm fascinated by this topic because it is true there's a big wage gap. Now, why is there a big wage gap is the question. And I believe that at the end of the day, and there's a lot of study to back this up, that at the end of the day, men simply are better for asking what they want. And so when that translates into the wage gap, quantifying that, asking for the salary that you deserve, a better salary, a better compensation plan in your very first job. If you are under salaried by I think it's $7,000 in your very first job. And then you progress over the course of your career and you assume pretty conservative promotions and pretty conservative wages over the course of the year. By the time you're retirement age, that equates to over $1 million. It's
Just like
over
the
$1 million
trajectory.
of lost. Yes, because then when you go to get your next job, you discuss salary and in your head what you need and what you want. And if you start off not being able to ask for it, it accumulates and it exponentially accumulates. And it equates to a significant salary deficit compared to at the very beginning, if you're assertive and ask for what you deserve and understand what your worth is and what your value is. So it's a real thing. So I believe that that's the reason why, men, and especially in sales, by the way, the sales industry has the largest wage gap between men and women. And when you think about, you would think, oh, it would be in like an IT industry or something that's predominantly, male, but it's not. It's in the industry where your very job is asking for the sale. And so men get bigger projects, men get bigger budgets, men have bigger staff, all of these different things because they know how to ask for what they want. So, you've got, and this is not male bashing, and it's not, and I'm not saying that we should act more like men, that women should act more like men. Absolutely not. Because women from a very early age, again, Harvard School of Business study looked at young boys and young girls starting at 5 all the way up to 15 and how they communicate. And from a really, really early age, almost from when you start communicating, boys will communicate in a way that's very direct, that has very competitive language, that sounds like you need to do this. And it's not particularly soft. It's not even particularly gentle, but it's very, very clear. And girls from a very early age will have communication like, it would be really nice. I would really love it. And much softer, but not clear on what they're asking for. And so I'm certainly not saying we need to act more like men, but there are situations when it comes to being assertive and knowing our value where our communication style often does not serve us well. And there are a lot of reasons why. There are definitely a lot of reasons why. You're right. It is value. It is the idea that acceptance, almost everything that we want to do that we don't comes down to acceptance. We think people aren't going to like us. And, fear of value. Do we have enough to contribute? I think it's why women apologize so much, because we don't think that what we have is valuable enough to interrupt someone or to take up someone's time. Or
I say that to my wife all the time.
Yeah.
She apologizes for everything. And it's a conditioning, I guess, in a sense, where she in a situation feels like, I guess it would be, she almost puts the other person on a pedestal. It's like, well, I would rather either take the blame for this situation, even if it's not my fault, or I would just rather, make you happy, even at my own expense. And I see her, and she owns her own business too. And I see her make this mistake all the time. I see her with this type of thinking, where there's a time and a place to say, this interaction, I'm giving to you as much as I can. I want you to be happy. I want you to like me. I want you to feel comfortable. And I'm not necessarily trying to win or trying to get my way. And I think it's an oversimplification, I guess. But when she's trying to get a client, and a client is telling her a price that she doesn't like, or is asking for more work than she can handle, at the beginning, she really struggled with that, because the ultimate value to her was, being agreeable with this person.
Sure. The relationship part.
Yes.
Women are very, very driven by relationships.
Uh-huh.
Women are peacemakers. Women are communicators. Women are driven by relationships and very emotionally driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which are all wonderful characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful characteristics. Emotion is what connects people together, right?
Yeah.
But what happens so often is the relationship will win over asking for what we want or asking for what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're describing.
Yeah. And I think exactly like you said, right? Like there is a huge advantage to learning that type of language and that type of communication. Being able to be diplomatic, being able to um, be softer in the way that you present things, uh, being able to communicate and understand people emotionally and understand subconscious cues and things like that. Those are all very, very valuable. And the opposite um, is can also be a detriment. You know, that more the clear, the competitive, the direct. It can be a detriment depending on the situation. I mean, I know a lot of guys that are like huge sales guys. I come from the sales world, and they know what they want. They're competitive, they're clear, and they're blunt, and it works great in their sales life, but it's terrible in their relationships, or it's terrible in their recruiting life. Like they're not good leaders a lot of the time. They're good salespeople. Again, an oversimplification, but I think what you're doing is cool because it's the combination. It's not like, hey, you need to always be assertive. You need
Yeah.
to add assertiveness to your existing attributes of communication.
I think what you're talking about, yes, I agree with everything you just said. I think what you're talking about is the difference between clearly asking for what you want and always going in with an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And when you always go in with an agenda, you don't listen, and you tend to not value the other person because you know exactly what you want, you know exactly what you're going for,
Mm-hmm.
and thereby you don't understand what the person's needs are, you don't effectively listen. One of Covey's principles, which I love, is seek first to understand and then to be understood. But when you are so direct and so assertive, and even on the bordering on aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
aggressive and assertive are two very different things. When you know exactly what you want, when you're that type of land the plane salesperson that you're describing, right?
Yeah.
Which I will admit, have been most of my life. I have a son who is, that you know well, right? What you don't do is you don't pay attention to the other person. And I'm not talking about just simply the words. I mean, words that come out of people's mouth are such a small percentage. It's like 20% or something of what the actual meaning is.
Mm-hmm.
Not paying attention to the silence, not paying attention to the body language, not paying attention to tone, right? Like all of these things that make up so much of the message, the deeper
Mm-hmm.
message. So I think that's what you're describing. And you're right. Women do have that ability to pay attention to all of the things that aren't on the surface. And when you go in with an agenda, that type A agenda, you miss all of that. But that's very different than sticking up for your rights and sticking up for yourself and asking for what you want. You don't get what you don't ask for
Totally.
in life.
Yeah.
So you can do it both ways. And honestly, it's hard, Reed. It's really hard. And it's typically a learned behavior. Only about 5% of the population is assertive all the time, meaning not aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
meaning not passive aggressive, meaning not passive, but can clearly communicate what they need, right?
Uh-huh.
There's 4 different types of communication, and it's very small percentage that really has these assertive skills. So that's what I and assertive is not letting people take advantage of you, not apologizing for like air we breathe, and
Yeah.
and if at the same time you're not nasty, you're nice, you're kind, you're using good listening and all of these different things. So there's this really, really great line down the middle of all of that that's called assertive behavior.
I really like that distinction. I had never put them into those specific categories. That's interesting. The spectrum. So aggressive,
Yeah.
um, aggressive, assertive, passive aggressive, and passive.
Yeah.
Huh, that's cool.
Passive
And
is just saying, passive, you're saying to yourself, I should just not say anything. I
I
should just be
shouldn't
the
be here.
peacemaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should just let it go. Just let it go. And that so often is what women do for the benefit of the relationship. But sadly, when you're passive, you let someone walk all over you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not sticking up for yourself. You're not sticking up for your own rights. Aggressive is completely on the other end of the spectrum where you don't care about the other person.
Mm-hmm.
You only care about yourself. It's like my way or the highway. That's what you're saying to yourself, right? I only
Yeah.
care about my agenda. So that's on the opposite side. Assertive is right in the middle. You care about everybody, but then passive aggressive is sort of the top of this triangle. And honestly, and it's a little bit of, it's the culture that we live in. You know, we're both Utah based. It's the culture that we live in, and it comes from a place of wanting to be kind
Mm-hmm.
and not wanting to hurt the other person's feelings. But it's the worst one. And
It's
it's the worst
worse
one
than
because
aggressive.
nobody wins. Nobody wins in that scenario.
Oh, I totally agree. And like, it's so funny that passive aggressive has almost become like a staple. It's like a cultural state. It's like if you got to learn how to be passive aggressive because that's how we communicate now. Um, and it's so annoying. And I find so I love what you say. Like assertive is like the sweet spot. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, like you said, they confuse assertive and aggressive. Um, and so assertive is a sweet spot where you're not bowling someone over, but you're also not getting pushed over yourself. Passive aggressive is the most obnoxious one because it's like I want my thing, but I also want to be able to maintain like a I don't know, a facade that I'm being super nice.
Mhm.
And it's just like, oh, I roll my eyes so hard
Yeah,
at
for
that.
sure. So it's the idea that you aren't able to communicate what you need in the moment for whatever reason, whether you don't have the courage to do it or whether you're trying to be nice or whatever your reason is, right? We all do it. So we all have different reasons. And then you can't get it out of your head. It just eats at you. It's in your head. You
Uh-huh.
can't let it go. And so what happens is you start telling everybody else what you really should have said to that person. And usually, because you've let it stew in your head for a while, it usually doesn't come out in a clear, concise, and kind way
Mm-hmm.
that it would if you just would have said what you needed to say in the beginning.
And it's resentful and it's
Yes,
usually bigger than the real problem, you know.
true, true.
I
Yes,
feel
it
like,
is.
correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like so assertive is the right way for essentially almost any communication situation. And I feel like men go when men err, they err on the side of aggressive. And
Mhm.
when women err, they err on the side of passive aggressive. And so when a man and a woman are both communicating poorly, like in a relationship,
Mhm.
I feel like the man is being overly aggressive and the woman is being overly passive aggressive. And so the guy is saying, "Hey, why don't you just say what you think? Like and just tell me direct." And he's being harsh and he's being aggressive, right? He's like,
Mhm.
I can't be inside your head." And then the woman is now taking that information and saying, "Well, this is aggressive. I'm not just going to get run over. I'm not going to be passive anymore, but now I'm going to stew on it. And now I'll take it out in other ways and I'll take it out subtly and I'll give them the silent treatment or something." And then that's where they
It's
see the fight.
true. It's true. And you add emotion into that. As I said, women tend to be more emotional, which is a gift that we have. It's something that really does connect people together. But usually,
Mm-hmm.
when a conversation has escalated to the point that you're describing, emotion kicks in on top of everything else.
Uh-huh.
And when you're emotional, emotions will overtake rational thought And so it just makes the problem even worse of being
Mhm.
able to be direct and ask for what you want. Now, and that's pretty that's a pretty stereotypical view of men and women.
Mhm.
It is often true, but here's the other thing that I believe is true, that opposites attract. So if you're not falling into that stereotype in a relationship, it's the complete opposite, because opposites do attract.
Mhm.
So you've got the woman who's pretty aggressive, and then you've got her partner who, you know, lets her walk all over him, because
Right.
it's the complete opposite, right? It's a
Right.
complete opposite. And yeah, you're right. It's hard to find the right balance of communication. But the thing that makes me this, and it is sad, it is a sadness, because I think women have incredible ability and incredible power, and most of the time don't even realize the power that we have.
Mhm.
And the part that makes me sad is to hear women start, you know 50% of their phrases with "I'm sorry" or "I'm afraid."
I hate to bug you, but
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I need a minute. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, even passing someone, just passing someone. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about, what are you sorry about? Sorry about, like, being in the grocery aisle next to you, and it's so, when you start paying attention to how often we do it, it's extraordinary. When you think, I start half of my phrases with an apology. No wonder no one takes me seriously.
mhm.
No wonder people don't think that I have value and think that I have something relevant and important to say. No wonder I didn't get that job that I interviewed for. I start off with saying I'm sorry. In other words, I am telling you in advance that what I have to say is not valuable enough.
Mhm.
And it's so simple when we pay attention to how we do it, to simply replace it with a statement of gratitude. That's what I will always coach to. Replace it with a statement of gratitude. Thank you for having patience to wait for me.
Mhm.
Thank you for giving me some extra time to discuss this. And it's really easy to substitute, but we still love "I'm afraid," the phrase "I'm afraid."
Mhm.
Yeah.
I really like that. I've been trying to implement that myself. Like, you can almost always replace "thank you" for "sorry." Like, "Hey, sorry I'm late." Like you said, "Thank you for waiting." One of them, and when someone says sorry to you, it doesn't make you feel good that now you're in the position of having to forgive them. You would rather receive
Yeah.
a positive than have to receive a negative. And so when someone says, "Hey, thank you for waiting," now they're giving me value. They're saying, "Hey, you're good for waiting," instead of "I'm bad for making us start late." And
Absolutely.
it's a total paradigm shift.
It is a total paradigm shift. And I I also think that we tend to stumble over ourselves. Let's use an example. You're late, right? And you just overdo it on the apologies, and then you feel like you have to have this big dramatic reason, versus "Thank you so much for waiting. Let's get down to business," right?
Uh-huh.
Or, my personal absolute pet peeve. I speak a lot and I do a lot of presenting, and
Mhm.
so, what that translates to sometimes is you watch things with a very critical eye, whether you want to or not, right?
Mhm.
And starting off some kind of a presentation, a talk, a speech, whatever it is, with your apology of how unprepared you are.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
oh, and all that is, Reed, is you are in an uncomfortable situation.
Mhm.
You are insecure, and
Mhm.
so you are trying to compensate for that by setting low
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, how often do you see that, like, at church? Like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't prepare. I found out about my topic last night. The
Right,
bishop
and then you
called
go
me."
into this elaborate story, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's
throw the
always,
whoever's sitting on the stand under the bus, right?
mm-hmm,
And well, I'll tell you how often. It's often enough that when it happens, over the years, my kids will all look over at me because they know how strongly I feel about it. Because everything with your kids, when you know something and you have something valuable, you tell your kid, right? Okay, guys, here's what we're never gonna do we're never gonna stand up and set the bar low, right? So those types of things where you stand up, you look people in the eye, you have a smile on your face, you don't set the bar, right? All of these different things you want to
mm-hmm.
teach your kids, these life lessons, right? So yeah, unfortunately, your kids know the things that just kind of get to you.
Well, and it's like you don't have that much information to go off of when you are communicating with someone. Like, let's say I'm going to interview someone for a job, or someone is my leader, or they're doing some public speaking. Like, I don't have the ability to go back and look at them in every different context and say, hey, maybe they're not a good public speaker, but maybe they're good one-on-one, or maybe they don't interview well, but they're great on a team. Because when you're communicating with someone, you have a very superficial view of everything. So you're getting all these signals. Hey, they're not looking me in the eye. Hey, they're looking down. Hey, their voice is shaking. And one of those signals is what they say about themselves. I think that's one of the most powerful signals. You're trying to determine the value that this person has in an instant when you're talking to them. So you're like, okay, how do they look? How do they dress? How do they present themselves? What's their body language like? And what do they think about themselves? And so if you come in and you're immediately like, hey guys, I'm not valuable. I'm sorry that I'm even here. Everything I'm about to say is dumb, but can I please get a job? Well, why would you expect that person to be engaged with that, right? Like, they only have a couple of seconds to determine everything about you because they don't know you. And so give yourself as much of a leg up as you can. That's why I think dressing nice is actually such a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be well groomed if you're a guy.
Mm-hmm.
People think, hey, that's superficial.
Mm.
Everything is superficial about a first
Everything is
impression.
superficial about a first impression.
Mm-hmm.
Agree. And you want to practice empathy and you want to try and put yourself in their shoes, but in situations like a job interview is the most extreme. It's the most extreme of everything that you just described. If you're the one, everything has to be at the top of the pile, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I go back to men versus women. Studies show that women won't even apply for a job unless they've checked all the boxes on the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And so that right there is a sort of interesting thing to think about. And then going into an interview, women going back to guys versus women versus men, a man will convince you that he can fly over the moon when he may not even be able to tie his own shoes, right? And a woman will tend to fixate on the one area that they don't do perfectly and dwell on that.
Uh-huh.
And when you look at that in a job situation, I mean, how do women even have a chance when they approach a job that way? And it's once again, I believe, why men are better at asking for what they want than women, because women won't take a chance and get out of their comfort zone unless they have to see some success. So women tend to take a tiny step forward, and then when they see some success, they'll take another step forward, and they'll take another step forward. Guys don't need that. Guys don't need that to get out of their comfort zone. They don't need that. They don't need that concrete success under their belt before they'll take a risk.
Interesting. I never
Yeah.
thought about it that way.
Yeah. Mm.
So guys can uh, take the leap a little bit. It comes more natural to say, hey, there's this big promotion. I'm just going to go for it. Whereas
Yeah.
a woman might work her way up to it, might say, well, I don't know if I should jump all that far. Let me find something here and then here and then here.
That's it. That's it.
Interesting. I wonder why that is.
Well, I think it's for some of the reasons that we've already talked about, that um, women are peacemakers. For women, relationships are more important. So in order to do that, sometimes, I mean, you have to raise your hand. You have to take credit for ideas. You have to be able to show your strengths. You have to be able to stand in the spotlight and say, look at me. And all of those are counter to the idea that I am just going to be a peacemaker. I want to it's more important for me to be a team player here. It's more important for me to be perceived as nice versus some kind of confrontational. People that will raise their hand and have a voice, whether it's literally raise their hand in a meeting or, raise their, or whatever in a situation, are the ones that stand out. And whether they're right or wrong, they're the ones that stand out. And so when your desire is to just keep the peace, often that's counter to that idea of being bold, of being courageous, of standing up and saying, yes, that is my idea and I think we should do it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's for all of those reasons.
I think too, when a guy is bold or confrontational, it can be viewed even outside of the business world. The words we use are a lot more positive.
Yeah.
Like, man, look at that guy. He's so ballsy. Or
No
like,
doubt.
he stuck it to him. And I find that's very much not the case. It makes sense that women are reinforced to not be that way, because it's like, oh, what a bitch. Right?
Yeah. No, it's the truth. It's the truth. And oftentimes that's an excuse, I think, that we use, because you can say something in a nice way. Well, okay, perfect example. Harry and Meghan interview that just
I haven't
happened.
watched it. It's been everywhere. I haven't
Dude,
watched
you
it.
are like the only person on the planet who has not watched that.
My wife has been trying to get me on. We'll watch it.
Well, it's 2 hours. 2 hours long. A perfect example. You've got, Megan, who did the majority of the interviewing, and she was really the one that she was the one that struggled, right? She was the one that the press was so mean to. And I even found myself doing it, saying, because everybody has to make a judgment. Do you believe her or do you not believe her? Or do you believe some of it or whatever? And is she being dramatic? And you watch her and you think, how much of this is real? And then Prince Harry comes on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy, I believe every word he says. It's perfect. I'm guilty of it. And I sit there and I teach this and I coach this all day long, right? And by the way, I do absolutely believe that she has had a terrible couple of years. And I do believe that it took a lot of courage for her to do what she did. And so just for the record, I absolutely think she is a courageous and strong woman. But I even found myself saying, who here is the nice one and who here is the nasty one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's hard because, I'm sure you see this with the women you're coaching. Like, you teach people to be assertive. You teach people to go for what they want. And one of the biggest fears is that they are now going to lose their relationships, that people aren't going to like them. And I do think that's, well, I would say an unfounded fear. I don't necessarily think that's true, but there's some truth to it. Like if everyone has been seeing you as passive and nice, and the value and the currency in your language has always been, well, I'm the soft one, come to me and I'll give. Then yeah, I feel like you probably could lose relationships because people have an expectation. I don't really think that's a bad thing.
Well, and it's what kind of relationship it is. If you're always the one who's the listener and you're always the kind one and you're always the one who is there for everybody, well, this is going to sound really selfish, and it is a little bit selfish. Well, then what about what you need? So relationships are sort of about boundaries, whether we know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And the boundary of it's a give and take, and I'm not always the one who, right? So yeah, you're right. But what kind of relationships will suffer? Is it a one-sided relationship? Is it a relationship where it's a joint partnership, right? So I think you have to dig a little bit deeper on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in the interview coaching I do, and working with women for so long, women talking about their accomplishments. We'll do mock interviews, right? And I'll push and, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And ultimately it always comes down to, well, I don't want to sound arrogant. I don't want to come across as cocky. And I think this very environment, this very purpose is about you talking about your accomplishments.
Uh-huh.
And it's still something that is hard, right? Still, when that's exactly what we're there to do. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at it in any other kind of life situation, right? We just tend to always defer and always want to be the team player, which isn't bad. It isn't bad until it becomes we are not standing up for ourselves, or we are not getting what we want out of some kind of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. This is the ultimate situation where you should be talking about yourself.
Yeah.
We invited you in here to
Yeah.
tell us how good you'd be at this job, and still it's a struggle.
Yeah.
I can imagine you've been in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
You were in the corporate world for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Were there a lot of situations, where you're coming in and it's a shock for people, especially like we're better about this now, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, you're coming in, you're running the meetings, you're being assertive, you're like, I know I am actually the boss. Did you see people struggle with that? Was there fragile egos, along the way? Did men have a problem with that?
So as a woman
Yeah,
specifically,
as a woman specifically.
I don't know, because to me that's never mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never have gone in with the idea that I have to overcome,
Mm-hmm.
or that I'm part of a boys network, or I'm being looked at differently, because I just never. As soon as you start making excuses like that, it a little bit of a victim mentality comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happened, to me, those people didn't matter enough to dwell on it or really analyze it. And so, I just do what I think is right. And I just do the job that I had at the moment. And I've never worried that much about it. And because I've never worried that much about it, whether it was there or not, it's your perception is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
So if I walk in and perceive, oh, nobody's going to take me seriously because I'm a woman, or nobody's going to take me seriously because, I didn't even graduate from college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went to 3 years of college, and then I dropped out. If nobody's going to take me seriously because I don't have a college degree, or if nobody's going to take me seriously because I'm the youngest person or the oldest person, right?
Mm-hmm.
You let that voice in your head take over. So if that happened, I was fairly oblivious to it.
Probably a good thing, right?
I think so. I think it served me well. I also think it didn't hurt. I'm 6 feet tall, and I love to wear heels. So I'm 6 feet tall with a couple inches added on. And so it doesn't hurt when you can stand toe to toe with someone and
Or
look
tower
someone
over
in the
them.
eye. There is some real data behind physical advantages that people have. So I think that's something that worked. I'm certainly not saying that tiny petite women cannot, kick butt, but I think my height probably also worked to my
Oh
advantage.
no, there's absolutely an advantage, and this is one thing that I always feel bad for short men and short women. It's like, what can you do? We talked about receiving all these signals in the blink of an eye to make an impression of someone, and height, stature, all that stuff does play a big role. It's not the only thing. My boss right now is very petite. In fact, my last couple bosses have all been women, and they've all been petite. And
Mm-hmm.
it's never crossed my mind that thought, but you can definitely see how that could play a role. It's like the subconscious, hey, I'm going to have a confrontation with a 6'5", 300-pound man. The biological response is going to be different than I'm going to have a confrontation with a 5-foot
Totally.
petite woman.
Totally. Yeah, there's also a lot of studies that, and there's kind of a crazy number, and I'm going to misquote it, but how many CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are over like 6'1" or 6 feet, 6'2", something like that.
I've
Yeah.
heard presidents as well. Presidents are
Yeah.
like one of the tallest like professions in the world,
Yeah.
besides probably
Well, I
like
mean, George
basketball.
Washington, it's what you always hear about with George Washington,
Hmm.
one of the most magnificent leaders in our history. You hear constantly when you study George Washington that his height was this very imposing,
Hmm.
this thing. So I don't know. I don't know whether that's but we tend to always we don't want what we have.
Yeah.
You're too short, you're too tall, you're too that, so I mean I remember I was in 7th grade and 5'8" and
Hmm.
like 10 pounds soaking wet or something, and just wanted to be fit in and just be average. Just
Hmm.
wanted to be average, right? When you're that age in junior high, you don't want to do nothing. You don't want to stand out ever. And I remember my mom, and so I would slouch, which of course makes it worse, right? It just
Uh-huh.
makes you look more awkward. So, and I just remember my mom just trying so hard to talk to me about what an advantage it is and be proud of what you are and who you are and what you look like, no matter what it is. and
Hmm.
and all it takes is for you to have a little bit of confidence in yourself and believe in yourself, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But it does tend to be human nature that we just want something other than what we are.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the grass is always greener, right? And I feel like that's so true across disciplines and across characteristics. When you have something, you really don't value it, especially if you have it for a long time. And that's the case. I mean, even with a job, it's so weird to think of. Like you have a great job, and you think, oh, I want that promotion. There's something on the horizon. The the energy of desire a lot of times is more passionate than the energy of satisfaction, right? So like I can be satisfied with what I have for only so long, but the desire is usually stronger, and so we're always looking other places. And like if you were to look objectively across the world, you think, oh, I have a job. Oh, I should be so grateful. I have a house. I don't live in the middle of India. I'm not in poverty. I'm not this. I have a relationship. I'm healthy. But we can't think that way. I don't think as humans we're designed to think of really where we're at in relation to everyone. I think where are we at in relation to the guy right next to me? I want to be. I'm the CSO. I want to be the CEO. I'm the
Yeah.
CEO. I want to be the founder. It's just this weird kind of untrue psychological problem that we have, where we're always looking at the wrong person to compare ourselves to.
Well, comparison is, I mean, it's a common quote. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Hmm.
And it is true. Now, I think that there's this line that exists with pushing ourselves and always wanting to be better and always moving forward and always progressing, right?
Hmm.
There's one side of it, and never being happy and satisfied with
Hmm.
what we have. And
Hmm.
it's a hard line. It really is. To truly be present in the moment and do all the things that you just said and look around you and think, I have so many things right now, to not get complacent, to not get lazy, to not get, to always have your eye on progressing. The flip side of that is never being happy with what you have. You
Yeah.
start to compare. You start to, you start to think, well, I got to have what my neighbor has and I don't have enough and I don't, right? It's hard. The line
Hmm.
is hard.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
completely agree. And I think when you're trying, I think you said it really well. When you're trying to fill a hole, like if you're not happy right now, most likely that promotion, that
Mm.
job, that new body, probably not going to be happy. If you can't find happiness right now, it's going to be really hard to fill it with some goal or some accomplishment. Now, that being said, I completely agree that you should be very aggressive in the assertions of your own life. You should always want to progress. But it shouldn't be because that's the only way you can be happy. I think you should be happy now and have a healthy amount of dissatisfaction. Um, but that you can be content and want more. And I
Yeah.
think that's the best way to be, because if you're just content, it stagnates, right? It gets stale. To be like, I found it. I found happiness. I even think the idea of like, you even hear this in religion, the idea of like eternity is you arrive and everything's perfect and then nothing changes for eternity. That sounds like hell. I feel like real nirvana would be like you arrive and now you can progress forever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I don't think you have to progress to be happy. I think you need to be happy in order to progress.
Yeah, that well said. Well said. I will admit, I feel like I spent a lot of my life um always thinking, well, it's going to be better when.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to
Yeah.
be better when my kids are older.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be better when I can lose 20 pounds. It's going to be better when we, are out of debt. It's going to be better when I have more time on my hands. It's going to be better when I'm on vacation, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these things. And that is the opposite. It's a big buzz phrase or buzzword right now, being present, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I just talked about, spending so much of my life in the mode of, is the opposite of being present.
Mm-hmm.
It is just constantly thinking it will be better when. And you're right. The reality is until you can find happiness in the moment, it's never going to be better, no matter what. No
Mm-hmm.
matter what you have, what you achieve, unless you can find that happiness in the present. And I really think that's what the term being present is really all about.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And it's like you keep moving the goalpost back. You're so right. You're
Mhm.
never gonna be there. You're not gonna feel different if you're the same person progressing, and you're not happy now. The new car, the new haircut,
Mm.
the vacation. You're sitting at the vacation and you're thinking, I'm on the beach. Why am I not happy?
Yeah.
Well, must not be the right beach. I guess I gotta go somewhere bigger. And that is very dangerous. I think the spectrum, you're exactly right. There's a good point where it's, hey, you're present. Um, you you nurture relationships. You're fulfilled in what you do, and you have a foot in the now, and you have a foot in what you could be, and you're happy with both. I think where people start to get these wrong ideas of this concept is when they think that presence is, I cannot think about the future. I cannot progress, because they swing too far the other way.
Yeah.
They think, hey, everyone's telling me to be present. Everyone's telling me it's more important. Don't live in the future. So I will only live in the now. And then that actually is hard. Like they're not forward planning. They
You
don't,
don't have plans, you don't have goals,
yeah.
you don't have a vision. Oh
Uh
yeah.
huh.
Look, life is hard. It's
Mm
a hard balance of understanding what you want for yourself in the future, being able to visualize it, being able to have good realistic goals, and still being happy with where you're at right now.
hmm. Mm
Oh
hmm.
yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Content and complacent aren't the same thing. And like you can be content maybe my vocabulary is wrong, but you can be content right now and want more. I'm happy, but I want more. Not to make me happy. I'm already happy.
Right.
Um, but the striving, honestly, in my opinion, makes life worthwhile. Just feeling like I have an unlimited potential and I'm currently a great person, but there's so much more I could do. I mean, I could make money, I could make friends, I could learn languages, whatever. Um, but not to complete me. I am a complete person striving for more. I am
Yeah,
not
and
an
it's
incomplete person.
and it's exciting to think about. The things that you just described are exciting. The ability to continue to learn, to continue to do new things, to continue to move forward. And I think that's the difference. I think that's really the difference between optimism and striving and perfectionism, right?
Hmm.
You think I'm going to be happy when things are perfect. I'm going to be happy when I have this fake life that I'm envisioning for myself.
Hmm.
And sadly, perfectionism, you rob yourself of that feeling of happiness and satisfaction because it's never complete.
Hmm.
Something is never complete to say job well done. And what you just described is this great optimism where you're always striving, you always want to be better, but you have this satisfaction along the way
Hmm.
of of that you don't rob yourself with this idea that it has to be perfect, right?
Hmm.
um, Achieving and striving is an optimistic view, whereas this idea that things have to be perfect before I'm happy is a very, very pessimistic view and a formula for unhappiness.
And a defense mechanism,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I'll start my business when I have
Mm.
all of my marketing done. I've
Mm.
got all my employees picked out by hand and I know exactly what we're going to sell. You know what? You're not going to start that
Oh
business.
yeah. So not only can you not finish something because it's never quite complete and never perfect, it even it paralyzes you from starting something as
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
as you just described.
Well, and an idea is always perfect when it's in your head, and so you
Yeah.
don't want to put it out into the world and fail, because that's like the ultimate rejection for so many people. So you think, okay, I'm just gonna keep, honing this, making it perfect, so that I cannot fail, and
Mhm.
I can put it out into the world, and I will immediately be the best at it. And that's just really not the way the world works.
Mm-mm.
The
No,
world.
and it's not intended to be the way
Mm,
that the world works. You think about how much more we learn from our failures than we do our successes. We're meant to fail. We're meant to stumble. We're meant to not have perfection really in anything.
mm-hmm. Like a
Yeah.
baby. A baby is not just like, I'm gonna lay here
Right.
until I can walk,
Good
and then I'm
example.
gonna I'm gonna run. I'm gonna run a marathon my first weekend. It's stand up, fall, bump their head, and they're just constantly learning. And I do think that this is one thing that's very societal. Um, and by societal, I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. I think, well, yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But um, the idea that failure is bad,
Mm.
I think it's because, when you're a kid, you embrace failure, and little kids don't really care, and they're, playing games with their friends, and they're just having fun, and they're getting into it, and they're learning to walk, and they're learning to socialize, and then pretty soon, you reach an age where, hey mom, I got a bad grade, and then, oh, are you okay? Is my kid smart?
Right.
And then, hey mom, I didn't make the baseball team. Ooh, or hey dad, I didn't do this. And there's like, you start to see in the faces of the people in your life this disappointment or the judgment of failure. That's obviously good in some respects, but I think too much of that, if you build failure and rejection too much up in your head, you end up doing nothing. You end up saying, I would rather avoid defeat than chase victory. And those people never win. They just stay in the same place
Yeah.
because the pain is so much scarier than the possibility of joy. So I'd rather feel neither. And so I'll just stay neutral. I won't even get in the game. I'll criticize, but I won't even get in the game.
Yeah. and Brene Brown talks about, well, there's a lot of great leaders that talk about this. Brene Brown talks about this idea of failure and who deserves to view you, who deserves to give you feedback, who deserves to criticize you are only the people that are in the ring. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
only the people that are failing alongside you
Mm-hmm.
and are willing to be in that ring. John Maxwell, he's one of the most respected um, teachers of leadership that there is, been around, I don't know, he's written dozens of books, and he talks about failure constantly. And he talks about it that the most important quality of a leader is I don't want to misquote him, one of the most important qualities of a leader is to be able to talk about your failures. I mean, that's vulnerability, that's authenticity, that's all of these things. And he'll often coach CEOs and encourage them to talk about their failures and to
Mm-hmm.
talk about what they learned from their failures, and very often met with resistance. The idea that I'm the captain of the ship,
Mm-hmm.
right? People can't see the captain in a situation where they're, failing. And, the great leaders are able to do it. The great
Mm-hmm.
leaders are able to talk about how they failed, what they've learned from their failures, and, but rarely are do we want to expose ourselves in a way that shows our failures and make us vulnerable in a way that we can talk about our failures.
Yeah. Power of Vulnerability. One of my
Yeah.
favorite books I've read. It's actually funny. I was thinking about who you reminded me of. It's Brene Brown. I'm glad.
Oh, it's the greatest compliment I've ever had in my life.
You said
Yeah,
that, and I was like,
she's
oh, yeah, that's who
phenomenal.
it is. I knew there was someone.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I love her.
Oh,
I
me
love her.
too. I think maybe one of the best books I've ever read was Power of Vulnerability. Daring Greatly.
Oh
Also,
yeah.
kind of what you were saying. It's based off that quote, right, by Theodore Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not the critic who counts, and it's those who are daring greatly. It's those who are in the arena. And I I do believe you should take criticism from those people, absolutely. And I also think there's a certain amount of healthy comparison that you can do with those in the arena. Um, if you can compare strengths to strengths, if it's from a help me to improve myself standpoint, um, you look at those people that you want to emulate, you can compare in the sense that, hey, they're doing something different. I want to be like them.
I think that's modeling. That's a term in the business space, the personal development space. That's what modeling is. Modeling is different from comparing.
Mm-hmm.
Comparing does not tend to end well, but modeling is watching someone who does something great that you think is extraordinary
Mm-hmm.
and saying, I want to develop those characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to watch them. I'm going to watch what they do. And in some cases, I'm going to emulate or copy what they do, not because I want to be that person, but because those specific things about that person are something that I want to develop.
Yeah.
Different from comparison.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I want to be like them. I could, they're doing something right. I want to do that as well.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
different than they're better than me.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't it interesting? I was looking through your Instagram earlier, and you were talking about imposter syndrome. And I find that so fascinating. And I was thinking about you, like where you're at in your career.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm not in your head, but I was thinking if I was you and I had this successful career in corporate America, and I'd done all these things, and then I was shifting, it almost like, well, obviously I'm going to be successful in my coaching and this second phase of my career. And I thought to myself, in my own life, that's not usually what happens. It's almost like you magnify the negative. Like you can do 1,000 positive things, and then there's one negative thing, and you remember that. And I was thinking, if I was you, I probably would be starting a new career and be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not going to make it. Despite so much evidence that you can be success. Have you dealt with that? Did you deal with wait, what am I doing? Do I know how to do this? You know?
Yeah, sure. Oh, imposter syndrome, it's a real thing. And I really dealt with it earlier in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was thrown into the corporate environment so unprepared, so unqualified. I mean, even to the point that I'm looking at people around me and some of the first meetings I attended going, I don't even have anything to wear to it. Like just crazy stuff and looking at going, what am I doing here?
Uh-huh.
And then you get some wins under your belt and you have a few small wins. And then those lead to bigger wins. And then those lead to being able to rely on yourself a little bit better and see that, yeah, okay, I do have some strengths here that I can bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about doing this on my own for so long that I think by the time that it actually happened, did I deal with not knowing what I was doing? Well, the reality is in so many ways, I did not know what I was doing.
Right.
Running a small business,
Right.
coming out of corporate America, but I don't know that it was doubting an ability more so than it was, okay, I better listen up and pay attention to what's going on around me, be okay with not knowing everything. And probably the most important thing is understand what my resources are. Where can I go when I feel like there's something that I don't know? Go to someone who knows better than I do, who's had the experience. I mean, YouTube University, right? Like the amount of content that I pulled about resources and apps and technology and how to, it's extraordinary what we have available. So when we let that doubt creep in and that imposter syndrome creep in, smack it out of the way and think, okay, I got a lot of resources available to me so that I can educate myself and I don't feel this way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's actually funny. That's almost exactly what Ethan told me when I talked to him.
Is it?
Going
Well, he
into
learned from the best. So that kid, we joke about it now. The amount of little startup businesses that he and his brother had when they were little kids. And Ethan was a natural entrepreneur, and it was a cookie business, and it was a dog walking business, and it was a little kids camp, and it was a little, and it was preparing the budget and a little mini P&L, and it, yeah, it's amazing what you can learn when you're a little kid and bring into adulthood and be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really cool and unique to me to see the situation that you're in where your kids can emulate you in a way that almost no kids emulate their mom. It is rare. And your dad, and their dad, like you had a stay-at-home husband. I don't know. I think that's something that I really, really like about that. Being able to grow up. My mom is a stay-at-home mom. Now she's actually more entrepreneurial. She's very entrepreneurial now. But I never grew up with the idea, I want to go and stake my claim in the business world like my mom. And I think that there's something really special about that.
Thank you. There are definitely pros and cons, and probably to over glamorize it in this conversation, Reed, probably doesn't make the most sense. One, yes, I think we were able to, my husband and I together, we were able to teach our kids that you can do anything you want to do. If it makes sense to stay at home, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or whatever, you can do what you want to do. If you want to pursue a career, you can pursue a career. So, and I feel like we did do some breaking of gender stereotypes because we also taught we taught our daughters that they need to want to take care of themselves and ask for what they want, and you don't get what you don't ask for. And then we taught our sons, you better learn how to do the laundry because that's not just women's work, right?
Yeah.
And I think that to help kids understand that from a very, very young age prepares you well for life. It
Mm-hmm.
prepares you very well for life. But at the same time, I say I don't want to over glamorize it. It was hard. It was really hard. And I applaud mothers and I applaud stay at home mothers and
Mm-hmm.
stay at home fathers as well. It was really hard to have to get on a plane when your kid was sick
Mm-hmm.
or to miss a play or to miss something really important in your kid's life. And that is what I, had to deal with for 20 years. And so there were so many times when I think, what have we done? And I love motherhood, and it is a great joy. And so it's what I think it comes down to is whatever your desire is, just be willing to go for it and understand that there is a way and that you don't have to to make the decisions that you make because you think that's what you're supposed to do. You go with what your
Yes.
instincts telling you, and you go with what your abilities are and what you want to do, what your desires in life are. And that takes you pretty far.
I totally agree with what you just said. The last sentence I think really resonated. It's not what you think you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that's so hard. You're growing up, you're a teenager, you're going to choose a college, or you're going to choose to be a stay-at-home mom or whatever. And there's so many voices, and you think, what are my friends doing? What does my mom want me to do? And it's very hard to clear all that out and say, what do I actually want? What makes me feel alive? And I agree with you. Like, there are people that are so judgmental to working women because they feel that, a long list of things. I'm sure you've heard. And they're like, oh, well, they just, they're neglecting their kids or whatever. And there's people that are so judgmental
Mhm.
to stay-at-home moms.
Right. What do they do all day? Right.
What do
Right.
they do all day? They have no ambition and
Mm.
stuff like that. And it's so funny. That's the reason why people don't know what they want, is because there's judgment coming from every direction. And they're like, oh, either way, I'm making a mistake. Either way, my neighbors are going to think I'm doing something wrong. What do I want?
And I think that's what true authenticity is. Authenticity is being able to live true to what you want instead of what you think you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was hard. I mean, this was back in the 90s. And are you kidding me? My husband quit his job. And the people who tried to talk us out of that, and, you know, he, motherhood is too important and he won't feel fulfilled, and he's got to be the provider and you've got to be the nurturer, right? And it worked for us, and i'm I'm so happy we didn't let people talk. It worked well for us.
Yeah.
You have to go with what your instinct is telling you to do and make decisions with your partner, and or with your spouse, and just do what you believe is right for you. That's hard. It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah. It takes a ton of courage. You're basically facing the whole world. But who cares? Because you are the master of your own world, and there's a million voices out doing their own thing. Why should they have a say in
But
my
we do
life?
care what people think, and some of us care more than others. But ultimately, I think it comes with maturity as well, to truly being able to say, I care about myself more than I care about what you think.
Mm-hmm.
That is really hard.
It's like a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah,
Hard.
it really is. It really is. Yeah.
Some people
Yeah.
go to the grave with their dad's voice in their head saying,
Yeah.
you're such a wuss because you didn't play varsity football. This is absolutely one of the hardest things, especially when you're fighting uphill. The good thing about your situation that a lot of people don't have is, from all that I can tell, you guys are on the same page. You may have been fighting the whole world, but you weren't fighting each other.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah.
hard for him? Did he see his life going differently?
Well, one of the gifts that my husband has is that he always, from a really young age, he knows who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And
As a gift.
yeah, it is a gift. He knows who he is and he knows himself. and he has a very quiet confidence. And yeah, it was hard. I mean, I was way more defensive of him than he didn't care. You know, I cared way more about what people thought and perceived of him than he did.
Yeah.
And I would watch, you know, him interacting with other guys, and he doesn't really play sport. He's an avid biker and hiker and very individual sports, but yeah, I would watch him try to connect with other men, and his career was stay-at-home dad, right? And he wasn't a big wasn't a big sports fan, couldn't really sit and talk football, wasn't interested in it. And so I would watch him interact and have relationships with other men, and I would find myself being really defensive of him. And it was pretty typical. It has been pretty typical to have another man say, "Oh, you have it great. I wish I was doing what you do. I have it great." And I just wanted to say, "You have no idea how hard it is to raise 4 kids and be at home with 4 kids."
And be judged by you all the time. Be judged by all these other dudes.
Yeah. And so I wish, and like, buddy, you would not last 5 minutes. Like, you would not last 5 minutes. And I realized it was just something to say. And I lost that defensiveness of him after a while. And, you know, he would joke around with it. And because people, if we were trying to get a car loan or something like that, and he would, in under occupation, right? He would put something like stay-at-home dad, and the loan officer, okay, so you're unemployed. No, you know, like it for 20 years.
Yeah.
And now it's a lot more accepted. Back then it was hard for him.
And even now.
It was hard for both of us. Yeah.
How did you guys meet? I'm picturing you dating, and I don't even know. I've never met your husband, but it's like, it seems like such an interesting and cool dynamic.
Well, we were set up on a blind date. He's from here, and I was going to BYU, and we were set up on a blind date, and I was working and trying to go to college and trying to go to hair school. So I had no time for that, unless someone was paying for dinner, in which case, sounds
Make
good.
an exception.
Yeah, so I joke. That was that. He was a great guy. Really, really knew who he was. Unapologetic. Treated everybody exactly the same, no matter who he was talking to, and also a gift, I believe, and really, really had some just incredible appealing qualities. And, you know, here we are 28 years later, I think. I'd have to do the math. I think 28 years, 29 years, maybe.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you jumping on. I love talking to you because I really like the way you see the world. I think I work in a very predominantly female industry. I'm on the corporate side of network marketing. So most of my coworkers are women, my bosses are women, and all of the distributors are women, essentially 90%. And so this is something that I deal with a lot. And so I like to see the way that you approach a lot of these different issues from a personal experience standpoint, the view that you can give women. I really like a lot of the communication insights that you have. And I think this is a very valuable set of skills for women and, well, quite frankly, men as well to adopt. I could talk all day. I know that you've got appointments and stuff. How can we support you? Anyone listening to this, if they want to be coached, if they want to follow you, what can we do to help you?
Well, thanks, Reed. It's been great to talk to you. As I stalked your Instagram, the header was, what does it say? I like talking to interesting people. And all the speaking I've done and all the coaching I've done, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be interesting. Okay, this is a level of pressure. I have to try to sound interesting. Just find me on Instagram. I'm really easy to find. Tori Poulter is my handle, or find me on Facebook. And All the information is there on how to join one of the groups. I have a group right now that I really, really am happy with. It's a closed group, that it's a subscription-based group. And we do guests every week. We talk about different topics every week. We just finished talking about authenticity. That was my segment last night, which is why I'm really thinking about it right now, this idea of authenticity and all the wonderful examples that we have around us of women and men, but women is really who I like to study, of who have these things that we can learn. But so it's easy to join one of my groups or invest in private coaching. My website is thecoachingsuccessgroup.com. But you know what I think right now, with the world that we live in, the hard world that we live in, we have to actively seek positive things. They don't roll into our lap right now. We got a lot of hard stuff going on.
Definitely.
Financial struggles with not being able to communicate with people and connect with people, or kids are, I just saw on the news this morning, the percentage of kids that are having depression issues because their world's been turned upside down. I believe more than ever, that they're saying that this is the hardest time since the Great Depression in the United States. And we have to actively seek good, positive, quality things in our life. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. So with my group, with all of the little business ventures that I have going on, is about the idea of actively seeking and investing in positive things. And sometimes it requires a little skin in the game to do it, right? We'll surf on social media. We could be surfing for positivity. We could be searching hashtags, but instead we end up, looking at like celebrity photos of the Golden Globes or whatever, or the latest dirt going on with whoever's getting divorced in Hollywood. Who cares? That does nothing for us in our life. So that's so in one way it was a really bad time to try and start a new business, but in the other way, this is what the world needs right now. Is to invest in things that are good and positive, that give us courage, that give us accountability. And that is what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing.
That's exactly what you're doing. I've got a couple contacts in the same space that you're in. I did a podcast, for example, with, do you know Kimberly Olson?
I don't.
After off air, I'd love to connect you with them. She's right up the same alley. So she's got a huge following on social media. It's business coaching. She's a little bit more social media coaching, but she's a lot of brand awareness, a lot of assertiveness training, that exact same kind of thing. And I think it'd be great for you.
Fabulous. I'd love to.
I'll send you her info, give you a little intro or something. But again, Tori, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I'll have everyone go follow her, learn how to be a boss, and we'll have to talk again soon.
Thanks, Reed.
Go hug that grandbaby.
Thank you. I will do that. I will take that advice.